Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. This week, the fifth video of Purified Faith, the last video actually. I'll add one more video just about how to apply this word, a little application. So the last 4 weeks I've been talking about purified faith. We've been talking about holding on to our faith in the midst of difficulties, in the midst of challenging situations, whether it be trials of life or persecutions. And how they test our faith, how they purify us, how God uses the fires and the challenges to actually make us better and to help us grow in faith. I shared something about how we shouldn't grow our faith before the difficulties come, but actually right now is the time to choose for faith. It's the time to say, I'm going to hold on to the goodness of God before the challenges come and make sure that I hold on to Him, as well as that in the end, our faith is not even necessarily faith that the circumstances will change right here, right now. But our faith is that God is good, and that our hope is in eternity, that we will be with Him, and that there will be one day, and that also all our circumstances will be in line with that, whether it be on this earth or in the life after. So in closing this last video, I want to share a story with you from the Bible, a very well-known story from the book of Daniel 3 to be exact, the story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. They were three men that have chosen faith before the trials came, and they show us how through that choice and through holding on to faith, they were able to stand the testing. So I'm just gonna tell a little bit of the backstory. In the Bible you have the nation of Israel. They were called to worship God and God alone. They were given the law and everything. But through time, they weren't always faithful to God. Maybe more often not than they were. And so there happens a time that they're actually conquered by the Babylonian Empire and they are led into captivity. And so especially a few of the royalties of the nation of Israel, they are brought to the court of the king, and they want to kind of assimilate them, bring them into the culture of the Israelites, so they will lose their identity and who they are, and just become Babylonians. And so we see that actually Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are faithful to God. They actually worship otherwise than some others in the nation. They continue to worship God, and actually because of that they prosper, and the people there seated, and the king actually appoints them to a high place in his army. And so that's where we're getting into the story. They are in a high place, they're overseeing things, and they're prospering. But some people, some of the Babylonians, are getting jealous, and so they're trying to think of a way how to get rid of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they have this plan. What if we tell the king to build a big golden statue, and that every time that the sound of certain instruments sounds, everyone needs to worship this golden image, because they knew that this was forbidden for the Jews, and that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would not do this. And so they bring this proposal to the king, and the king agrees with it. He's excited. He's like, yeah, let's do that. I want people to worship me. I want people to see me as a god. And so this is happening. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do not bow down for this golden image. They hold on to their faith, and they say, I'm not gonna let the challenge of the world change this. And so again, the counselors of the king bring this to him, and they say, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bow down for you. And so the king is filled with anger and calls for Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego to be brought to his court. And then he says to them, he says, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you guys don't bow down for the golden image? And they say, yes, king, this is true. And then the king says, well, in a minute there will be the sound of these instruments, and if you bow down, everything is fine, we forget about it. But if you do not bow down and worship, I will throw you into the burning fire, into the furnace. And that's when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego show their faith. That's when they show where they're at. They say, King, they speak up and they say, King, we want you to know that no matter what, we will not bow down for this image, but we trust that the God whom we serve will be able to save us from the fire. So they're choosing faith. But what they say afterwards is even more beautiful. They say, but even if our God will not save us, we want you to know, King Nebuchadnezzar, that we will not bow down and serve you. So you see that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't necessarily, they do believe that God can change the circumstances. They do believe in a way that he will. But they're saying our faith is not dependent on whether God changes my circumstances or not. We will not bow down. We will only worship God. We will choose faith. We will choose that he is good, no matter whether he saves us or whether he doesn't save us from the burning furnace. And so when they say this, the king is full of anger, and he's even so angry that he commands his soldiers to heat the hot furnace 7 more times hot than it normally is. And they bind up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the fire. And it says that while they're being thrown into the fire, some of the soldiers actually are being burned alive. So hot was the fire. And I really believe that when we hold on to God's goodness in the midst of our difficulty, that honestly we will be able to face fires that normal humans will not be able to face. Because there's something supernatural that we draw from the strength, knowing that God is with us in the deepest and in the most challenging times. And so they're thrown into the fire, and the king is watching that. And at some point he jumps up and he said, didn't we throw 3 men into the fire? I'm seeing 4. And the 4th man looks like the son of the gods. And so he realizes what is happening, and he calls out to the fire and he says, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come out of the fire. And they come out of the fire. And I think it's so awesome, the details that are described here in the Bible. It says that their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. None of the hairs on their head was burned. None of their clothes was being touched by the fire. Isn't that amazing? And so King Nebuchadnezzar he just realizes, and he starts actually even worshiping God. He says, wow, you guys, and he acknowledges their faith. He says, you guys, because you know the God that you serve, went against the command of the king, and you guys were not afraid for the fire. And so he acknowledges that the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, our true God, that he is the God of the universe and that he is above everything. And I think this is so cool. This it's not only a story, a testimony of the faith of Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, but it also shows that when we truly hold on to the goodness of God, it's a testimony to the world outside of us. And we see that the heathen king, through this story, worships God for who he is. And I think that's just amazing. So when we hold on to faith, when we choose to believe in God, no matter our circumstances, it's a testimony to the world. And if we look back in history and we see the story in Europe where Christians were persecuted by the Roman Empire, Empire Nero was burning Christians alive, and they were throwing Christians in front of the lions. But the story goes actually that when the Christians were thrown in front of the lions, normally people would be afraid, they would scream, they would be full of terror. But it says that the Christians actually responded by worshiping God, and there seemed to be a peace on their face. And that was actually the turning point that Romans started coming to faith, because they saw that there was something in these Christians that went beyond their circumstances. There was a real faith in a God, not just something to hold on to, or some sort of comfort, or some sort of superstition, but they saw that there was a true peace that went beyond understanding. And so I want to encourage you that when you are able to hold on to that, not on your own strength, but in relationship with God, trust him, trust that he is good. It will bring a supernatural peace, which will also be a testimony to your surrounding, to believers and to unbelievers. So I hope that this series blessed you. This was kind of the final part. I think there's a lot more to say. I would love to hear your thoughts. Send me a message or leave a comment if you have any thoughts. Love to hear from you. And in a few days, I will post some thoughts on how to apply this message. Ciao.